Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning, and today my guest is Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher and website designer in Wilmington, Delaware. And for this interview, Imogen is actually going to interview me, and the general topic is going to be a gravity support and freedom and the Alexander technique, and it will be part five of a four-part series we've already recorded. Imogen, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Robert. Good to be here. I guess our theme today, as we kind of continue with this series, is how um, we can apply some of these ideas to specific parts of the body. Before we get into that, I think we need to have some context. And
hmm
so, first, could you define the Alexander technique briefly for us?
Okay, well, there are a lot of ways to describe or define the Alexander technique, but I think for the purpose of these interviews, a good description is it's a way of learning how to use your body as efficiently and effectively as possible, and in particular in accordance with our inherent design and in accordance with the actual forces of nature that we inhabit on the surface of the earth.
Right. And as you say that, maybe um, you can give us a little bit of a brief recap or a bit of context from the past interviews so
Sure.
that we kind of know that for going forward with what we're going to talk about.
Right. And I do suggest to anyone listening to this that they listen to the earlier interviews because they really set the stage for the kind of things we're going to be talking about. But a very brief recap is that there are in the world we inhabit four fundamental forces. This is from physics, basically. Uh, One of which is totally irrelevant. We can dismiss it, but there are three that are actually significant for us, and of those three, there are two that are very obviously significant, and those are the ones that we've mostly been talking about. One of them is gravity, and the other one is what in physics is called the strong force. That's its actual name. And it's what binds material together and keeps it from flying out away from itself. And it is what, in fact, is what provides the counterforce to gravity. Gravity is a product of the entire planet operating on us and on all of us. The strong force is a property of the immediate area that we're supported by, and it's applied to either the soles of our feet if we're standing, or our sits bones, hopefully, if we're sitting well, or some combination, or our whole backside if we're lying on our back on a mattress or in constructive rest, that sort of thing. So
Right. So the strong force relates to the support in our gravity support and freedom.
the force that actually directly opposes gravity,
Right.
and it's a force that relates to the fact that matter doesn't want to get deformed, and when we're standing, say, on a floor, we are deforming it, and the floor tries to correct that, and in effect, that's an upward push. And
Right.
its origins are completely different from gravity, but it just happens through this amazing system in which we inhabit to provide the necessary counter counter force to gravity that keeps us from being drawn all the way to the center of the earth, which
Right.
would be awkward,
It,
really.
yeah, it wouldn't work out too well,
Wouldn't work
really.
out at all. Um, those are the two main forces that we are subject to no matter what we do. And I think our big challenge is to learn how to use those forces effectively. They are actually very, very useful forces.
Right.
A-
So the forces in our title are the gravity and the support.
And
It's
the
referring
support,
to the strong force,
those
right?
are the main two we're going to talk about, but
Um,
I do want to talk a little bit about the third force,
okay.
which is electromagnetic force. So it
Okay.
includes light, for example. And I want to touch on that towards the end of this talk. But
Okay.
mostly it's about gravity, and just incidentally, gravity includes the atmospheric pressure that's exerted on us because the atmosphere itself is a product of gravity. No gravity, no atmosphere, no
Right.
us, basically,
Okay.
is
Well,
how it works.
so yes. And the freedom is in the title too. And we
Mhm.
talked how, what's the context of that?
The context of freedom is general Alexander Technique freedom directions that were pioneered by our colleague Jennifer Roig Frankoli, an Alexander teacher in Cincinnati. And they are the format of directions that I found most helpful in addressing this question: how do we make the best use of these, for the moment, these two major forces that are being applied to us? As I said before, we're going to get those forces no matter what we do. You could be dead and you'd get those forces, but
Right.
the
How
trick
can we
is,
make the most of them?
how can we make the most of them?
Right.
Absolutely,
And
yes.
and so today you wanted to talk about how we could apply these ideas to specific parts of the body. So
Well, I want
maybe
to
you can
just
start.
stay today with one specific
Okay.
part of the body, which
All
is our
right.
head,
Okay.
and parts of our head, or
Okay.
things that are in or very close to our head.
And is there a reason why you're focusing?
Sure. I mean, Alexander had this notion of primary control, that our head neck torso relationship was key to everything, or extremely important, perhaps you could put it.
Hmm.
And so, of all the sort of individual parts of the body that you might want to pay attention to in terms of these forces, the head seems to be a pretty obvious candidate. Um, so yeah, that's why we're starting with the head, but then we're going to drill down a little more deeply from that.
Hopefully not literally,
Not
but
literally, no, no, no. And I just want to say one more thing before we begin:
sure.
that these directions that I'm going to be talking about, and the ones in the previous podcast, students pick up on these directions very, very quickly. But what they all tell me is that they feel that what has helped them to use them so quickly and effectively is the little bit of physics 101 that I go through with them, explaining what gravity is, how it actually operates on us, what the strong force is, how it operates on it. I spend a little time on that because otherwise, it's very easy to start thinking of these as very abstract ideas that don't have anything to do with us, and why would I even be directing around them?
Mm-hmm.
So I make a big point of explaining that to students before I get them to use any of these directions.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
So
the head.
the head. Well, we for the whole body, a nice freedom direction involving gravity and the strong force could be: I'm free to receive the pull of the earth and the push of the earth. I mean, they're both forces coming from the earth. One's pulling us down, one's pushing us up. So I could say I'm free to receive the pull. I could even say the pull of gravity and the upward push of the earth. Or I could condense that to just say I'm free to receive the pull and the push forces that are coming from the earth. So in terms of my head, I can say the same thing about it. My head is free to receive the pull of gravity and the push of the earth.
Do you always do both things
You
separately?
could do them separately. You could start if you're at home listening to this. You might want to start by saying, "My head's free to receive the pull of the earth," and it would be helpful to have some idea of where the center of gravity of your head is located, and it is right behind your eyeballs, right in the middle. Between if it's behind your eyeballs, but not behind an eyeball because it's exactly in the middle.
Right.
So it's pretty far up and it's pretty
Hmm.
far forward. Most people are
Hmm.
shocked by that. So no, and I think it's very useful to map that out for
Mm.
yourself.
Yeah.
So if you could say, my head is free to receive the pull of gravity or the pull of the earth.
Hmm.
Now, that is, if your head is actually going to be free to receive it, it's almost certainly going to result in a little tiny little rotation forward of your head, right?
Forward and up, no
Well,
doubt. I
well,
mean,
yes,
yeah.
we're getting to that,
Hmm.
and that idea, my head's free to receive the pull of gravity. Well, yeah, that is forward and up. That
Hmm.
is exactly it, but formulated in a in connection with dealing with these forces to which we're subject.
Yeah, I'm just suddenly thinking it's also sort of an indirect means
Exactly, exactly.
to having that happen, which seems
Yes.
yeah, you know what
And
I'm
we're going to
saying.
get to more of that. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. It's
Yeah.
it's an indirect way of getting at exactly what Alexander was interested in.
Hmm.
Now, I can also say my head is free to receive the upward push of the earth. Now, since the upward push of the earth is actually not applied directly to your head normally, let's say you're standing or sitting. Let's take
I
stand.
guess it would only be directly if your head was
It was
like
resting
this
on the
tilted.
ground. If you were lying with part of your head resting on the ground, but if you're standing, then that upward force that you're saying my head is free to receive has to is actually applied to the soles of your feet. So it has to then travel up through your body in order for your head to receive it. It has to travel up efficiently through your body, which means you're organized efficiently. So now we're getting really indirect. We're saying if you say to yourself, my head's free to receive the support of the earth, and your body gets that command, as it were, a very light command, it says, well, that's an interesting idea. The only way we can make that happen is clear the channels between your feet and your head to allow that force to make its way up in an efficient way. And typically, if you experiment with either or both of these directions, you're going to notice stuff changing not just about your head, but probably more likely about the rest of you. For example, you might notice your breathing gets a little easier, or you might notice a subtle change in muscle tone in your legs. That's very common because gravity, the pull of gravity, is centered at your center of gravity, which is a couple of inches below your navel. The upward force from the earth is applied to the soles of your feet, and in between are your legs.
Hmm.
So you have these two forces traveling up and down your whole lower body. So this idea of focusing on your head as what you want to efficiently receive the forces of the earth, or these two forces of the earth, is an indirect way at getting at um, receiving, asking your whole body to receive them, which in turn is a somewhat indirect way of applying Alexander type directions to how you function. So,
So
so it
doubly indirect.
is totally indirect, and therefore I think way more powerful for a number of reasons. One is, if you say, I find with students and myself, if I say my head's free to receive the pull and push of the earth, it's very difficult for me to manipulate that in any way. You
Mm.
know, I sort of would give up on manipulation,
Yeah,
or
because
or
what?
implementation
Yeah.
is another way to put it. And that's how most students react. That is just so far out of their um, concept of what they might help, as it were,
Hmm. Hmm.
that they and if they're okay with just saying, okay, yeah, I'll buy into that as an experiment, and then they'll notice stuff that very common, as I say, is breathing. And the beauty of that is that the thing they're noticing is on the surface a very different thing than they're self-directing about. And so it's a little easier to not get drawn into the breathing, and therefore diverting your attention to something that's not the direction you want to be playing with. Does that all
And
make sense?
yeah, very interesting.
And I should say that the kinds of experiments that I encourage students to do are very short. 10, 15, 20 seconds of this, and then deliberately throwing it away after a short time and then bringing it back. I don't think I think for most people it's really good to explore the direction, toss it away, and then bring it back, because in the tossing away, they're going to get a pretty good sense of where they were before the directions took hold. So
Right.
this would be
Yeah.
a great set of directions to use, let's say, in walking. You're walking
Yes.
along and you say, hey, my head's free to receive. And at some point, you can condense it to the point where my head's free to receive the forces of the earth. Just
And
that.
that would encompass both
Yeah,
things.
it's
Yeah.
probably going to be useful for most people to play around with them individually a bit, but
Sure.
anything you can do to shorten the directions going to be a good idea. So that's the basic idea about
Great.
the head. And I would also say that what comes out of this, and what we'll talk about in a minute, is that the kinds of directions that address how we react to the forces of nature have the same kinds of effects on our use, our functioning, as directions that are more traditional
Right.
Alexander directions. Neck free, my neck is free, or my breathing is free, or any of the other kinds of traditional directions. There is no conflict. The advantage, a little bit of the advantage, as I said, in these directions dealing with real forces that are operating on us, is that it kind of gets at stuff a little more indirectly, and for the reasons I just said,
Sure.
could be more, seems to me to be more powerful.
Yeah, very interesting. So you said you were going to get into also specific parts of the head,
Parts.
right?
Well, yeah, parts of the head. Um, the most obvious movable part of your head, and some people would say it's not even technically part of your head, is your jaw. Your jaw can move quite a bit with respect to your head, so it has some independence.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I just said about the head, you could say about your jaw. My jaw is free to receive the pull of gravity and the push of the earth. And I urge you to experiment with that. You might be astonished at what you'll find.
Yes, sorry, I was just
You were
thinking
just
it
doing
right
it. You
now.
couldn't talk.
Yes.
And again, I personally like walking as the framework to explore these because you get not only the obvious or well, sometimes obvious breathing changes, but you also often get you out of the corner of your mind while you're doing these experiments, you can sense the heaviness or relative heaviness of your footfalls as you walk. So I like walking, but these apply nicely in other activities
Could
too.
be doing anything like sitting,
Sitting,
doing an interview with someone on Skype.
absolutely. When
Yeah,
you're speaking, you could say, "My jaw is free to receive the support of the earth,"
right.
and see what happens to your speaking. Yep.
Yeah,
So
maybe
that's
when
one. Another obvious part, if you like, is again not really part of the head, but it's in that area, is your tongue. You could
oh,
say my tongue is free to receive the support of the earth and the pull of gravity. That's one to explore. And as we move on up, we get to the eyes. The
oh,
eyes. And certainly those same directions can apply very nicely to your eyes. And sometimes people have very powerful experiences with that.
oh, that's
You want to
interesting.
prepare people for that a little bit.
So, can you give an example
Well, uh, well, an example of
of a
the
powerful experience
oh,
someone has
people
had?
will just slightly freak out because their eyes function in a different way, and suddenly they're seeing maybe their peripheral vision will open up or colors get brighter. I've run into all sorts of stuff around that.
Really
Yeah,
interesting.
and so there is a set of directions, and I want to jump ahead to one more, but come back to the eyes in a minute.
Okay.
Everything that I'm about to talk about now is in the realm of um, it's still I'm still experimenting with, and it may seem to some listeners to be slightly too far out there, but give it a try.
Okay.
You know where your center of gravity of your head is. It's as I said, behind your eyeballs. What's right on top of that, right above that, is your prefrontal cortex of your brain. Right, it's right
Okay.
up there, right behind your forehead
Sure.
is where it's located. And that's, of course, the big decision making, conscious, aware, whatever, in charge of those kind of things, part of your brain. I don't think it's an accident that it's located right above your head center of gravity. And I don't see any reason why you can't say my frontal cortex is free to receive the pull of gravity and the push of the earth. That's something to play with too.
I'm stunned. No, I'm just
I
trying.
thought you might be.
No, I'm thinking. I think I need more time on my own to take that one
Well,
in.
I throw that out as something for people to experiment with and
Yeah.
see what you find. But I want to get back to the eyes
Okay.
because I mentioned that we're mostly talking about these two forces, gravity and the strong force
Right.
of the Earth. But of course, there's electromagnetic stuff,
Okay.
and that includes light and heat that we get from the sun, for example, light that we get from the moon and from stars. And actually, light that we get from anywhere is ultimately it is a source of energy. It is when this is hard for people sometimes to wrap their minds around, but if you look up at the night sky and see a star,
Hmm.
there's actually little bundles of energy that are coming right into your eyes from that star that started out gazillions of years ago.
Hmm.
It's real stuff. It's real energy. It's tiny, obviously, and those little bundles are hitting your eyes, and of course, they're hitting all the rest of you. Now, when we talk about the sun, it's pretty obvious that it's hitting all the rest of you. You get sunburned if you're out on a beach and
Mm-hmm.
without covering. That's a real force, and actually quite a powerful force. But I want to talk. I'm more interested in this context in talking about the light aspects, or the what facilitates you being able to see. So, um, the previous direction I suggested for your eyes is my eyes are free to receive the pull of the earth and the pull of gravity and the push of the earth upwards. But you could expand that to say my eyes are free to receive all the forces that are available to me. And that would include the electromagnetic light, basically. That would include light. And again, that can open up some very interesting experiences for people. So, if we're talking about light from distant stars, then we are going outside of the solar system, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how important this is relative to just dealing with solar system stuff, but you could say I'm free to receive all the forces of the cosmos. That would include everything, including the pull of the earth, the pushing up from the earth, the light from the sun and the moon, the light from distant stars. Now, the thing is, I personally, apart from the fact that that's a pretty far out direction, I I personally would like to add the word good forces of the
Uh-huh.
cosmos, because who knows? You know, you don't want to encourage being free to some malevolent force, and we really don't know that much about the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
So I just add that little thought. I'm free to receive the good forces of the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
I think that direction and the one that we talked about earlier with our brain, with our
Uh-huh.
prefrontal cortex, I think those are ones to take up after you've done some experimenting with the more obvious things. You
Yes,
know,
I would
I
think
don't think
so.
they
Get
are.
kind of familiar with the head
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
I would put them in. You know, this is experimental,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't, and it does sound crazy unless you actually understand the underlying physics. You know, we are getting energy from the stars.
Right.
Now, it's not much, but it's energy.
I get it.
So that's basically all I have to say on this topic. It is a bit of a work in progress, especially the last things we talked about, and I would certainly love to hear from anyone who about their experiences with it. I've been using those last two things with some of my students, and they seem fine with it. And I but I don't have enough data to really say, oh, for sure, that's a great direction. I think it's something to explore.
Yeah, I've definitely explored with in the, directing this way around the head
Hmm.
and the eyes in the first way that you suggested,
Right,
not the
right, right.
very, very useful. It seems to be very useful to me. So this has been fascinating, Robert. So uh, nothing else you
No, that's it for
would like?
now. I'm going to guess that in a few months we're going to do a part six, but I have no idea what part six is going to be.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I will hand it back over to you to finish
Okay.
up.
Okay. Well, thanks, Imogen. This has been great. My guest today has been Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher and website designer in Wilmington, Delaware. I'll put a link to her website by the interview. I'll also put a link to a site that will um, give you more information about the Alexander Technique. And I think I'll also put a link to the page on which all five of these podcasts will be listed. So you can go back and start at the beginning, which I strongly suggest you do if you haven't already played with these ideas. Anyway, thanks, Imogen.
Oh, you're welcome.